Welcome to a story about love, betrayal, and the devastating unraveling of trust. This isn't your typical tale of heartbreak. No, it's a raw look at how one man's world came crashing down, one secret at a time. Our story takes place in a quiet little town in Tennessee called Fairview. Picture this: tree-lined streets, a close-knit community where everyone knows everyone. It's the kind of place where secrets don't stay hidden for long, or so people think. But as you'll soon see, some secrets can fester under even the most watchful eyes. Sam Carter was the kind of guy everyone admired. He worked hard, built his own landscaping business from the ground up, and had a reputation for being as reliable as they come. Sam was the kind of man who'd help you fix a broken fence, then stick around for a cold beer and a chat about life. To most, he seemed like he had it all: a thriving business, a cozy home, and his wife, Emily. Emily Carter was no less admired. A kindergarten teacher at the local school, Emily was known for her warmth and patience. She had a laugh that could fill a room and an easy charm that made people gravitate toward her. Together, Sam and Emily seemed like the perfect couple. High school sweethearts who had turned their teenage romance into a solid marriage. 15 years together, and they were still the couple everyone looked up to. But, as they say, not everything is as it seems. Sam's day usually started before dawn, his truck loaded with tools and equipment as he headed to his first job site. Emily's mornings were calmer, sipping coffee while preparing for another day of teaching. The mornings were always rushed, filled with quick pecks on the cheek and promises to catch up later. But lately, Sam had started noticing things. Small, almost insignificant changes that planted the first seeds of doubt. Emily had begun locking her phone. Sam didn't want to pry, but it struck him as odd. They'd always been open with each other. No passwords, no secrets. Now, she'd started turning the screen away whenever he walked into the room. First, he shrugged it off. Everyone deserves a little privacy, right? But then there were the late-night texts. The glow of her phone screen lighting up their bedroom while she claimed it was just work stuff. And then there were her absences. Emily's girls' nights had gone from a once-a-month tradition to almost every week. Sam wanted to believe her, but deep down, something didn't feel right. He'd hear her laughing on the phone in another room, her voice carrying that carefree tone that used to be reserved just for him. She seemed happier, just not with him. Sam was a patient man, but patience has its limits. One night, as Emily was getting ready to head out again, he worked up the courage to ask her about it. "Another girls' night?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Emily didn't even look up as she tied her hair back. "Yeah, we're meeting at Bella's. It's been a long week. I need a break." He forced a smile. "You've been going out a lot lately. Everything okay?" Her hands froze for a split second before she resumed fixing her hair. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? He wanted to press her, to ask why she'd been so distant, but her guarded tone stopped him. Instead, he nodded and let her walk out the door. As he sat alone in the quiet house, a feeling of helplessness washed over him. He couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong, but he didn't know what to do about it. Confront her? Follow her? He hated the idea of being that guy, the paranoid husband snooping through his wife's life. But what choice did he have? The following week, the doubts grew louder. Emily had started coming home later and later, her explanations growing thinner each time. Then there was the cologne, a faint, unfamiliar scent on her clothes as he tossed them into the laundry. It wasn't his, and he couldn't ignore it. One night, he confided in his best friend, Jake. They were sitting on the back porch, beers in hand, the cicadas filling the silence between them. "Man, I don't know," Sam admitted. "It's probably nothing, but I can't shake the feeling that something's off with Emily." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Off how?" "She's been acting different, distant, locking her phone, going out more. I'm probably overthinking it, but..." Sam sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Jake. It just doesn't feel right." Jake leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Look, you know her better than anyone, but if your gut's telling you something's wrong, maybe you need to dig a little deeper." Sam frowned. "You're saying I should spy on her?" "Not spy," Jake said carefully. But maybe it's time to find out what's really going on. Sometimes the truth is the only thing that'll give you peace. Sam didn't like the idea. He wanted to believe in his wife, to trust that this was just a rough patch they'd work through. But Jake's words stuck with him. A week later, after another late night of Emily's unexplained absence, Sam made a decision. He couldn't live in limbo anymore. He needed answers, no matter how much it hurt. That's when he reached out to Chris Maddox, a private investigator Jake had recommended. Chris wasn't what Sam expected. He was younger, sharper, with a no-nonsense attitude that made it clear he didn't deal in sugarcoating. "Here's how this works," Chris explained as they sat in his small, cluttered office. "I'll follow her, see where she goes, who she meets. Photos, timestamps, the whole deal. But fair warning, this might not end the way you want." Sam hesitated, staring at the contract Chris slid across the desk. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him. Was he really ready to uncover the truth, no matter the cost? He signed. The next few days were torture. Every time Emily left the house, Sam wondered if Chris was trailing her, snapping photos of her with another man. He hated himself for it, for the mistrust that had crept into his marriage. But he couldn't ignore the knot in his stomach, the nagging feeling that his world was about to change forever. When Chris called him 3 days later, Sam's heart sank. "I've got something," Chris said, his tone flat. "You need to see this in person." Sam drove to Chris's office that evening, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe a photo of Emily with a friend, some innocent misunderstanding that would make him feel foolish for doubting her. But what Chris showed him was far from innocent. On the desk was a series of photos. Emily, laughing with a man Sam didn't recognize. The two of them walking into a hotel together. Her hand on his arm, their faces close. Sam stared at the images, his chest tightening. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the confirmation that everything he feared was true. His wife, the woman he'd loved for 15 years, was with someone else. "Who is he?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chris flipped through his notes. "Name's Nathan. Works in finance. They've been meeting up for about 2 months, mostly hotels and out-of-town spots." Sam clenched his fists, rage bubbling beneath the surface. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the lengths Emily had gone to hide it. Chris's voice broke through his thoughts. "What do you want to do, Sam?" Sam didn't answer. He couldn't. All he knew was that his life would never be the same. Sam left Chris's office with the photos clutched tightly in his hand, the weight of his discovery pulling him down like an anchor. The ride home was a blur. He couldn't tell you if the radio was on or what streets he took. His mind replayed those images over and over again. Emily's smiling face, her hand on Nathan's arm. She didn't look like a woman making a mistake. She looked happy. That was what cut the deepest. By the time Sam reached his driveway, night had fallen. He sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the darkened windows of his home. Their home, the place where they'd built a life together. It all felt like a lie now. He wanted to storm inside, to confront her, to demand answers. But the exhaustion in his chest held him back. Confrontation would come, but not tonight. The next day, Sam avoided Emily as much as possible. He left early for work and came home late, using any excuse to stay busy. But the distance between them only seemed to grow. She didn't ask why he was so quiet, didn't press him about his long hours. If anything, she seemed relieved. That stung even more. That night, lying in bed next to her, he stared at the ceiling, the silence between them deafening. He thought about the man in the photos, Nathan. Who was he to Emily? Was this just some fling? Or had she fallen in love with someone else? And if she had, where did that leave Sam? The next morning, Sam made a decision. He wasn't going to let this fester. He'd confront Emily, get the truth out of her. But he needed to be smart about it. He needed leverage. Chris called later that day with an update. "I did some more digging on Nathan," Chris said. "He's married, got 2 kids, lives in Knoxville. Looks like he's playing both sides." Sam felt his stomach churn. Nathan wasn't just ruining Sam's life. He was betraying his own family too. It was like a twisted mirror of his worst nightmare, seeing what could have been his own actions if he'd ever strayed. "Send me everything you've got," Sam said. "I need to know who I'm dealing with." Chris hesitated. "You're sure about this? Once you confront her, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Sam said, his voice hard. "She made her choices. Now I'm making mine." That night, Sam waited for Emily to come home. She was late again. He sat in the living room, the photos from Chris spread out on the coffee table, his Glock resting in its holster on his hip. Not because he intended to use it, but because it was part of him, a reminder of the strength and discipline he'd once had. A discipline he'd need tonight. Emily walked through the door just after 10, her face lit by the glow of her phone. When she saw Sam sitting there, her smile faltered. "You're up late," she said, her voice uneasy. "We need to talk," Sam said, gesturing to the couch. "Sit down." Emily hesitated but eventually sat, her eyes darting to the photos. The color drained from her face as realization set in. "Sam, don't." He cut her off, his voice cold. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." She swallowed hard, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Sam snapped. "That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That you've been lying to me for months? That you're sleeping with another man while I'm out there busting my ass to keep this family afloat?" Tears welled in her eyes, but Sam didn't care. He'd spent too long being the understanding husband, giving her the benefit of the doubt. Now it was her turn to face the music. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "I was lonely, Sam. You're always working, always tired. And Nathan, he made me feel special." "Special?" Sam scoffed, his voice rising. "You think I don't work my ass off for you? For us? You think I'm out there for fun? I'm doing this to give us a better life, Emily." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. But Sam didn't move to comfort her. He couldn't. Not after everything. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Sam said, his voice flat. "And now, I don't know if there's any coming back from it." The room fell silent, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy in the air. Sam wanted to yell, to scream, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused him. But instead, he stood and walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "Out," he said. "Don't wait up." The next few days were a blur of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. Sam threw himself into his work, using the physical labor as a way to distract himself. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the gnawing ache in his chest. Chris called again, this time with more intel on Nathan. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Nathan's wife has no idea. She thinks he's the perfect husband." Sam felt a bitter laugh escape his lips. "Perfect husband, huh? Sounds about right." Chris hesitated before continuing. "Look, Sam, I can reach out to her. Let her know what's going on. But that's your call." Sam considered it. Part of him wanted to blow Nathan's life apart the way Nathan had blown his. But another part of him knew it wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't undo the damage Emily had done. "I'll think about it," Sam said finally. That night, Sam sat alone in his truck, staring at the photos Chris had sent. He felt like a man caught in a storm, unsure of which way to turn. Emily's betrayal had shattered him, but it hadn't broken him. Not yet. As he sat there, a thought struck him. Maybe this wasn't the end of his story. Maybe this was just the beginning. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let this define him. If you've made it this far, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Stories like Sam's are a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can find the strength to rise again. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Sam's confrontation with Emily had left the air between them raw and unsteady. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Conversations were clipped, movements cautious, as if either of them might detonate the fragile silence with a single word. Sam tried to focus on work, but the betrayal sat heavy in his chest, a weight he couldn't shake. He didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had cheated, or the fact that she had chosen to stay quiet about it until he forced her hand. One night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzed. It was Chris. "I've got something you'll want to see," Chris said. His tone was grave, the kind of serious that sent a shiver down Sam's spine. Sam met Chris the next morning at a diner just outside of town. The photos Chris laid on the table weren't just damning. They were infuriating. Emily and Nathan weren't being cautious anymore. They were at a restaurant together, laughing openly, her hand resting on his. Another shot showed them walking into a hotel, not even trying to hide their intimacy. The most gut-wrenching, though, was one of Emily smiling at Nathan in a way Sam hadn't seen in years. "They're getting sloppy," Chris said, breaking the silence. "It's like they don't care if they get caught." Sam's hands tightened into fists as he stared at the photos. "She doesn't care," he muttered, his voice low. "Not about me, not about us." Chris hesitated before speaking again. "There's more," he said. "Nathan's wife. She has no clue about any of this. I ran into her at the school drop-off. She's living in a completely different reality." Sam felt his stomach churn. This wasn't just about him anymore. There were kids involved, a family that had no idea their foundation was crumbling. The thought made Sam's blood boil. "What do you want to do?" Chris asked, his voice careful. Sam didn't answer right away. His instincts told him to confront Nathan, to demand answers. But he also knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and ensuring that Emily and Nathan couldn't keep running unchecked. "I want to talk to his wife," Sam said finally. "She deserves to know." Chris nodded, sliding a folder across the table. "Her name's Rachel. Here's her contact info. But Sam, be careful. This could blow up fast." Later that day, Sam found himself sitting in his truck outside Rachel's house. It was a modest two-story home with a swing set in the yard. He could see a woman inside, moving around the kitchen. She looked happy, content, everything he wasn't. Took him a while to gather the courage to knock. When Rachel answered the door, she looked surprised but polite. "Can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Sam began, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "My name's Sam Carter. I think we need to talk. It's about your husband." Rachel's smile faltered. "Nathan? What about him?" Sam hesitated. "Can I come in? This isn't something I can say on your doorstep." Rachel led him to the living room, her posture stiff. Sam could tell she was already bracing for the worst. He sat on the edge of the couch, the folder Chris had given him resting on his lap. "I don't know how to say this," Sam started, "but I think Nathan's been seeing my wife." Rachel's face went pale. "What?" Sam opened the folder and handed her the photos. He watched as her eyes scanned each one, her hands trembling. She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't believe this," she whispered. "He's been with her?" Sam nodded. "For at least 2 months, probably longer." Rachel sat back, her expression a mix of shock and devastation. "He told me he was working late, that he had to travel for meetings. I never thought to question it." Sam leaned forward, his voice softening. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I thought you deserved to know." Rachel wiped her eyes, her breathing shaky. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm going to do, but thank you for telling me." As Sam left Rachel's house, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him felt lighter, as if sharing the burden had lessened it somehow. But another part of him felt a growing sense of urgency. Nathan wasn't just wrecking Sam's life, he was destroying Rachel's too. That night, Sam confronted Emily again. He didn't mention Rachel or the photos, not yet. Instead, he focused on the one question that had been gnawing at him. "Do you love him?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. Emily froze, her eyes widening. "Sam, don't dodge the question," he said, his tone sharpening. "Do you love him?" She looked down, her hands twisting nervously. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's complicated." Sam felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. Complicated? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and you call it complicated? Emily flinched, but she didn't argue. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, Sam shot back. And now I need to know the truth. Is there even a chance for us to fix this? Emily hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know, she said finally. I'm sorry, Sam. I don't know. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. She didn't know. That wasn't an answer, it was an excuse. And Sam was done with excuses. The following day, Sam called Rachel to check on her. She sounded stronger, more resolved, and together they began to form a plan. If Nathan and Emily thought they could keep sneaking around without consequences, they were about to learn otherwise. As the days passed, the tension between Sam and Emily grew unbearable. They moved around each other in the house like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, their conversations limited to the bare essentials. Sam wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the way Emily seemed unwilling to fight for their marriage. But Sam wasn't one to let things go unresolved. With the truth of Emily's affair out in the open and Rachel's pain now intertwined with his own, Sam knew that a confrontation with Nathan was inevitable. It was no longer just about getting answers, it was about reclaiming control of his life. As the days passed, the tension between Sam and Emily grew unbearable. They moved around each other in the house like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, their conversations limited to the bare essentials. Sam wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the way Emily seemed unwilling to fight for their marriage. But Sam wasn't one to let things go unresolved. With the truth of Emily's affair out in the open and Rachel's pain now intertwined with his own, Sam knew that a confrontation with Nathan was inevitable. It was no longer just about getting answers, it was about reclaiming control of his life. The confrontation. Sam decided to take matters into his own hands. One evening, after receiving another update from Chris about Nathan's whereabouts, he drove to a local bar where Nathan was known to unwind after work. The place was dimly lit, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke heavy in the air. Sam spotted Nathan almost immediately, sitting at a corner table with a few coworkers, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. For a moment, Sam stood there, watching him. This was the man who had turned his life upside down, the man who had taken something precious and treated it like nothing. The anger bubbling inside Sam was almost uncontrollable, but he forced himself to stay calm. This needed to be handled strategically. Sam walked up to the table, his presence immediately drawing Nathan's attention. The laughter at the table died down as Nathan looked up, confusion flickering across his face. "Can we talk?" Sam asked, his voice steady but low. Nathan's expression shifted, a hint of nervousness creeping in. He nodded, excusing himself from his coworkers. The two men stepped outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the bar. "What do you want?" Nathan asked, trying to maintain an air of confidence, though Sam could see right through it. "You know who I am," Sam said, crossing his arms. "So let's not play games. I know about you and Emily." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. "Here's the deal," Sam continued. "You're going to end this. Now, whatever you think this is, whatever lies she's told you, it ends tonight." Nathan finally spoke, his voice defensive. "Look, man, I didn't force her into anything. If she's unhappy with you, that's not my fault." Sam stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "Unhappy? You think that excuses what you've done? You've got a wife and kids at home, Nathan. A family you're supposed to care about. Does Rachel know where you are right now? What you're doing?" Nathan's face paled at the mention of his wife. Sam saw the cracks forming in his bravado, but he wasn't finished. "I've already talked to her," Sam said, watching as Nathan's eyes widened in shock. "She knows everything, so you've got a choice. You can end this mess and try to salvage what's left of your life, or you can keep playing games and lose everything." For a moment, Nathan just stared at him, his face a mixture of anger and fear. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back inside the bar. Sam didn't follow. He'd said what he needed to say. Now it was up to Nathan to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. The confrontation marked a turning point, but it didn't bring the closure Sam had hoped for. When he returned home, Emily was waiting for him. She must have sensed the shift in him because her usual defensiveness was gone, replaced by something that looked like guilt. "I know you talked to Nathan," she said, her voice quiet. Sam didn't deny it. "Yeah, I did. He knows it's over." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Sam, I never wanted it to get this far. I don't know what I was thinking." Sam shook his head. "You weren't thinking, Emily. You were selfish. And now we're both paying the price." Emily reached for him, but he stepped back. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't even know if I want to." The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Emily seemed to truly grasp the depth of the damage she had caused. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll give you space," she said. "But please, Sam, don't give up on us." While Sam was grappling with the fallout of his confrontation with Emily, Rachel was facing her own storm. After learning the truth, she had confronted Nathan in their home, demanding answers. Nathan tried to deny it at first, but the evidence Sam had shared left him no room to maneuver. Rachel wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. Despite the pain, she began taking steps to protect herself and her children. She met with a lawyer, started gathering financial records, and prepared for what she knew might be the end of her marriage. Sam and Rachel stayed in touch during this time, their shared experience forging an unexpected bond. They supported each other, not as potential romantic partners, but as two people navigating the wreckage of their lives. Weeks later, the situation came to a head. Emily, desperate to salvage their marriage, proposed couples therapy. At first, Sam was resistant. He didn't think a few sessions with a stranger could fix what had been broken. But after some reflection, he agreed. If nothing else, it would give them a chance to say what needed to be said in a controlled environment. The therapy sessions were raw and painful. Emily admitted to feeling neglected in their marriage, though she acknowledged that her choices were inexcusable. Sam admitted to prioritizing work over their relationship, though he couldn't ignore the betrayal. Through the sessions, Sam began to see a clearer picture of their relationship. Not just the cracks Emily had created, but the ones he had ignored. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave him a framework to understand how they had reached this point. Meanwhile, Nathan's life was unraveling. Rachel, armed with legal advice and undeniable evidence, filed for divorce. Nathan's attempts to win her back fell flat, his lies and infidelity too much to overcome. His reputation in the community began to crumble as whispers of his affair spread. Sam watched from a distance as Nathan's life fell apart. It didn't bring him joy, but it did bring a sense of justice. For the first time in months, Sam felt like he was regaining control of his own narrative. Sam stood on the porch of his home, staring out at the horizon as the sun dipped below the trees. Emily stepped out to join him, her presence quiet but not unwelcome. "I've been thinking," she said, "maybe we need time apart, to figure out who we are, what we want." Sam nodded. "Maybe you're right." The decision wasn't easy, but it felt necessary. They agreed to separate, giving themselves the space to heal and reflect. Whether they would find their way back to each other was uncertain, but for now it was the right step. As Sam packed a bag and prepared to leave, he felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, relief, and a hint of hope. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could rebuild his life on his own terms. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Stay tuned for the conclusion, where we'll explore how Sam and Rachel find closure and rebuild their lives after betrayal. Sam's decision to separate from Emily was like tearing off a bandage. It was painful but necessary. For the first time in years, he had the space to think clearly. He moved into a small rental on the edge of town, a modest place with just enough room to get by. It wasn't much, but it was his, and that was all that mattered. As Sam settled into his new routine, the silence was both a blessing and a curse. Without the daily chaos of married life, he had more time to reflect. He found himself replaying the events of the past few months in his mind, analyzing every conversation, every decision, every red flag he had missed. The pain was still fresh, but so was his determination to move forward. Meanwhile, Nathan's life was spiraling out of control. Rachel, with her newfound strength, had made her separation public. She wasn't interested in keeping quiet or sparing Nathan's reputation. She wanted accountability, not just for herself but for her children. Nathan had underestimated her, thinking she would stay silent out of fear or embarrassment. Instead, she stood tall, filing for divorce and making it clear she wouldn't tolerate his lies any longer. Nathan tried to spin the situation in his favor, portraying himself as a victim of circumstance. But the truth had a way of catching up to him. His colleagues began to distance themselves, his reputation in the community taking a hit. He was no longer the charming, successful businessman people admired. He was just a man who had lost his way and his family. One evening, Sam received an unexpected call from Rachel. Her voice was calm but laced with urgency. "Nathan showed up at the house," she said. "He's been drinking. I thought you should know." Sam felt a surge of anger. Nathan's recklessness was endangering Rachel and her kids now, and that was something Sam couldn't tolerate. "I'll be right there," Sam said, grabbing his keys. When Sam arrived at Rachel's house, the scene was tense. Nathan was standing on the porch, shouting incoherently, while Rachel stood inside with the door locked. Her children were upstairs, unaware of the commotion. Sam stepped out of his truck, his presence immediately drawing Nathan's attention. "You don't belong here," Sam said, his voice firm but controlled. Nathan turned to face him, his eyes bloodshot. "And what are you going to do about it?" he slurred. Sam took a step closer, his posture steady. "Go home, Nathan, before you make things worse." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Worse? My life's already ruined, thanks to you." "No," Sam said. "You ruined it yourself. Now leave." Nathan hesitated, his bravado faltering under Sam's unwavering gaze. After a tense moment, he stumbled back to his car and drove off, leaving Sam and Rachel in the stillness of the night. Inside, Rachel was shaken but composed. She thanked Sam for coming, her gratitude genuine. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up," she said. "You don't have to face this alone," Sam replied. "You've got people who care about you." Their bond, forged through shared pain, grew stronger that night. It wasn't romantic, at least not yet. It was something deeper, a connection born of mutual understanding and support. While Sam was finding strength in his new beginnings, Emily was grappling with her own turmoil. Living alone in the house they had once shared, she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. The silence that Sam had found liberating was suffocating for her. She missed him, the way he made her feel safe, the way he cared for her even when she didn't deserve it. One afternoon, Emily reached out to Sam. Her voice on the phone was hesitant, almost fragile. "Can we meet?" she asked. "I need to talk." Sam agreed, though he wasn't sure what to expect. They met at a coffee shop, a neutral space where neither of them had the upper hand. Emily looked tired, her once bright eyes dulled by regret. She fiddled with her coffee cup, struggling to find the right words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about everything." Sam waited, his expression neutral. "I know I hurt you," she continued, "and I know saying sorry doesn't change that. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you." Sam's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to believe her, but the scars she had left were still too fresh. "I don't know if love is enough anymore," he said quietly. "You broke something in us, Emily, and I don't know if it can be fixed." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She nodded, accepting his words as truth. "I understand," she said, "but if there's even a chance, I want to try." As Emily worked to rebuild trust, Sam focused on his own healing. He began attending therapy, not just for the sake of his marriage but for himself. He needed to process the anger, the betrayal, and the lingering pain that had consumed him. Through therapy, Sam began to see a path forward, Not back to the life he had before, but toward something new. He learned to forgive, not for Emily's sake but for his own. Carrying the weight of resentment would only hold him back. Rachel, too, was finding her footing. She enrolled in a course to advance her career, determined to provide a stable future for her children. Her resilience inspired Sam, and their friendship became a source of strength for both of them. The climax of this story came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet realization. One evening, as Sam sat on the porch of his rental, watching the sun set, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. The chaos of the past year had left scars, but it had also taught him something important. He was stronger than he realized. Emily called him that night, her voice steadier than before. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for giving me the chance to fix things, even if it's not enough." Sam smiled faintly. "We both needed time to figure out who we are, and maybe that's okay." Their conversation ended without promises, but with a sense of closure. It wasn't the ending Sam had envisioned when he first learned of Emily's betrayal, but it was the one he needed. If you've stayed with us this far, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to keep following stories like this one. Stay tuned for the final chapter, where we'll explore how Sam and Rachel rebuild their lives and discover what the future holds. Sam thought he had faced the worst of it, but as he tried to rebuild his life, the stakes rose even higher. Just as he began finding stability, Nathan made an unexpected and dangerous move that threatened to drag everyone down with him. With Rachel moving forward with her divorce and his reputation in shambles, Nathan was cornered. The once confident man who had waltzed into Sam's life was now a shadow of himself. Angry, reckless, and unpredictable. He began lashing out, showing up uninvited at Rachel's house or bombarding her with frantic texts and calls. One night, Rachel called Sam again, her voice trembling. "Nathan's outside. He won't leave. I'm scared, Sam." Sam didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys and headed straight to Rachel's house. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Nathan pacing back and forth on the lawn, yelling incoherently. Rachel stood on the porch, her phone in hand, her children peeking through the window with frightened eyes. Sam got out of the truck and approached cautiously. "Nathan, you need to leave," Sam said, his voice firm but calm. Nathan turned to face him, his expression wild. "You think you can fix everything, huh? You think you're the hero here?" "This isn't about me," Sam replied. "It's about doing the right thing. Go home, Nathan. Walk away before you do something you'll regret." Nathan's fists clenched, but something in Sam's tone must have reached him. After a tense pause, Nathan spat on the ground and stormed off, getting into his car and speeding away. Sam stayed with Rachel until the police arrived to file a report, ensuring she and her kids were safe. Meanwhile, Emily was watching everything unfold from a distance. Despite their separation, she kept tabs on Sam, hoping for any sign that they might reconcile. When she heard about Nathan's escalating behavior, guilt consumed her. She realized the ripple effects of her actions had gone far beyond her marriage. Emily reached out to Rachel, offering an apology and support. While Rachel was hesitant at first, the two women found common ground in their shared experience. Emily also began volunteering at a local women's shelter, determined to make amends in any way she could. For Sam, seeing Emily take responsibility for her actions was bittersweet. It didn't erase the past, but it gave him hope that people could change if they were willing to face their mistakes head-on. The breaking point came when Nathan crossed a line no one could ignore. Late one night, he broke into Rachel's house, his intentions unclear but undoubtedly dangerous. Rachel managed to lock herself and her children in a bedroom and called 911. Sam, who had been driving home from a late job, received a frantic call from Rachel. "He's in the house. The police are on their way, but I'm scared, Sam." Sam's blood ran cold. Without a second thought, he turned his truck around and sped to her house. When he arrived, he saw Nathan's car parked haphazardly in the driveway, the front door ajar. The sound of Rachel's muffled cries from inside spurred him into action. Sam entered cautiously, his every sense on high alert. He found Nathan in the living room, pacing and muttering to himself. A broken picture frame lay on the floor, its shards glinting in the dim light. "Nathan," Sam called out, keeping his voice steady. "It's over. Put this behind you and walk away." Nathan turned, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can just take everything from me?" he shouted. "My wife, my kids, my life. This is all your fault." Sam raised his hands in a calming gesture. "This isn't about me, Nathan. It's about the choices you made. But it's not too late to turn this around. The police are on their way. Do the right thing." For a moment, it seemed like Nathan might listen. His shoulders slumped, his expression softening. But then the sound of approaching sirens broke the spell. Nathan snapped, grabbing a nearby lamp and hurling it across the room. Before Sam could react, the police arrived, their shouts cutting through the tension. Nathan froze, realizing he was cornered. He dropped to his knees, his hands raised in surrender. Nathan was arrested that night, charged with trespassing and endangerment. For Rachel, it was the end of a long and painful chapter. She filed for a restraining order and took steps to ensure her family's safety. Sam stayed by Rachel's side throughout the ordeal, his presence a source of strength for her and her children. Their bond deepened, but it remained grounded in friendship and mutual respect. They both understood that healing would take time, and they weren't rushing anything. Emily, too, found a sense of closure. She continued her work at the women's shelter and began seeing a therapist to address her own issues. While she and Sam remained separated, they reached a place of mutual understanding, acknowledging the love they once shared, but accepting that their paths were diverging. Months later, Sam stood in his backyard, the sun setting behind the trees. Rachel joined him, her children playing in the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sam felt a sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. The pain of betrayal, the chaos of the past year, it had all led to this moment. A moment where he could look forward to the future with hope. "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice soft. Sam turned to her, his expression warm. "For what?" "For being there," she said. "For not giving up." Sam smiled, his gaze returning to the horizon. "Sometimes, the only way out is through." Sam thought the storm had finally passed after Nathan's arrest, but life rarely moves in straight lines. As he tried to piece his life back together, the events set into motion by Nathan's actions began to ripple out in ways he hadn't anticipated, pulling him into a final confrontation with his past and forcing him to make choices that would define his future. Sam was adjusting to the rhythms of his new life. He spent his days working on landscaping projects, finding peace in the methodical process of building something out of nothing. Evenings were quieter now, often spent reflecting on how far he'd come. But just as the calm started to feel permanent, Emily reached out to him with unexpected news. "I need to talk to you," Emily said over the phone. Her voice was hesitant but firm, like she had been rehearsing this conversation. Sam wasn't sure what to expect, but he agreed to meet her. They sat across from each other at a small cafe, a space that seemed to amplify the awkward silence between them. Emily fidgeted with her cup before finally looking up. "I've been seeing a therapist, and it's helped me realize a lot of things about myself, about us." Sam nodded, unsure of where this was going. "I made mistakes," Emily continued, "big ones, but I don't want those mistakes to define me. And," she hesitated, her voice catching, "I want to know if there's still a chance for us." The question hit Sam like a ton of bricks. He had prepared himself for almost every possibility, but this wasn't one of them. He thought about the years they'd spent together, the life they'd built, and the pain of betrayal that had shattered it all. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I'm glad you're working on yourself. I really am. But I don't think we can go back to what we were. Too much has changed." Emily nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand. I needed to ask." They parted on amicable terms, but the encounter left Sam feeling unsettled. It was a reminder of the love they had once shared and the price they had both paid for its collapse. While Sam wrestled with his feelings about Emily, Rachel was facing her own challenges. Nathan's arrest had given her a sense of relief, but the legal battles were far from over. custody hearings, financial disputes, and the emotional toll of rebuilding her life weighed heavily on her. One evening, as Sam visited Rachel to check in, he found her sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. "It feels like it never ends," Rachel admitted, her voice trembling. "Every time I think I'm making progress, there's another hurdle." Sam sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "You've come this far, and you're not alone in this." Rachel looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Sam. I don't know what I'd do without you." Their connection had deepened over the months, but it wasn't something either of them rushed into. They were both navigating the wreckage of their past relationships, cautious but hopeful about what the future might hold. Just when it seemed like the dust had finally settled, Sam received a call from Chris, the private investigator who had been instrumental in uncovering Emily's affair. "I found something you might want to know about," Chris said, his tone serious. Sam's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "It's about Nathan. He's been talking to people in the community, spreading rumors about you and Rachel." Sam clenched his jaw. "What kind of rumors?" Chris sighed. "That you were the one who drove Emily to cheat. That you're manipulating Rachel for your own gain. It's all nonsense, but people are starting to talk." Sam felt a surge of anger but forced himself to stay calm. "Why is he doing this?" "Because he's desperate," Chris said. "He's lost everything, and he's trying to drag you down with him." Sam thanked Chris for the information and hung up, his mind racing. He knew Nathan's actions were rooted in spite, but he couldn't let these lies go unchecked. It wasn't just his reputation at stake. It was Rachel's and Emily's as well. Sam decided to confront Nathan one last time, not out of anger but to put an end to the cycle of chaos. He arranged to meet him at a neutral location, a public park where tempers could be kept in check. When Nathan arrived, his appearance was a stark contrast to the man Sam had met months ago. He looked disheveled, his confidence replaced by a bitterness that radiated off him. "You've got some nerve," Nathan sneered as he approached. "Dragging me here like this." "I didn't drag you anywhere," Sam replied calmly. "I just want to talk." Nathan crossed his arms, his posture defensive. "What could we possibly have to talk about?" "This needs to stop," Sam said firmly. "The lies, the rumors. It's enough. We've all suffered enough." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Suffered? You think you've suffered? You've got no idea what it's like to lose everything." "You lost everything because of your choices," Sam countered. "You don't get to blame me, Rachel, or anyone else for that." Nathan's expression hardened, but Sam pressed on. "You've got a chance to turn this around, Nathan," he said. "Not for me or Rachel, but for yourself. You can keep holding on to this anger, or you can let it go and start rebuilding." For a moment, Nathan said nothing. The tension between them was thick, but Sam stood his ground, refusing to let Nathan's bitterness drag him down. Finally, Nathan exhaled sharply and looked away. "Maybe you're right," he muttered, "but I don't know how to fix it." "That's up to you," Sam said. "But it starts with taking responsibility." The confrontation didn't resolve everything, but it marked a turning point. Nathan began withdrawing from the public eye, no longer spreading rumors or causing trouble. Rachel's life began to stabilize, and she focused on building a new future for herself and her children. As for Sam, he found peace in the quiet moments of his life. The scars of the past hadn't faded entirely, but they no longer defined him. He and Rachel continued to support each other, their bond growing stronger with time. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Rachel looked at him and smiled. "You've been my rock through all of this," she said. "I don't think I would have made it without you." Sam returned her smile, his heart lighter than it had been in months. "We've been there for each other," he said. "And that's what matters." Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Sam, that was enough. Sam's confrontation with Nathan marked the beginning of the end. While it didn't erase the damage done, it was the moment Sam took control of his life again. With Nathan retreating from the picture, Sam, Rachel, and even Emily began to find a semblance of peace. Rachel focused on creating a stable environment for her children. She finalized her divorce, secured custody, and set clear boundaries to protect herself from Nathan's lingering influence. For the first time in a long while, her house felt like a home again, a safe haven where she and her kids could laugh, heal, and move forward. Sam became an integral part of that rebuilding process. He helped Rachel fix up her home, tackling everything from repairing the fence Nathan had once damaged to planting a small garden in the backyard. It wasn't about replacing anyone in her life but being there as a steady presence. Rachel found work she was passionate about, teaching art classes at a local community center. Watching her kids flourish and her own confidence grow, she realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. Emily's journey was more solitary. She continued her therapy and her work at the women's shelter, dedicating herself to helping others who had made mistakes but were determined to change. The experience humbled her, and for the first time, she felt like she was truly contributing something meaningful. Emily and Sam remained in touch, though their interactions were rare and mostly cordial. She didn't push for reconciliation anymore. Instead, she focused on finding her own sense of purpose. One day, she wrote Sam a letter, not to ask for forgiveness but to thank him for the years they had shared and to wish him happiness in whatever came next. Sam read the letter in his small rental home, a bittersweet smile on his face. It was the kind of closure he hadn't realized he needed. Over time, the bond between Sam and Rachel deepened. They weren't in a rush to label their relationship or push it into something it wasn't. Instead, they took it day by day, enjoying each other's company and supporting one another in ways that felt natural and unforced. One evening, as the kids played in the yard, Rachel and Sam sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Rachel leaned her head on Sam's shoulder, a quiet contentment settling over them. "You've been through so much," Rachel said softly. "And yet, here you are." Sam chuckled. "Here we are." It wasn't a grand declaration of love or a dramatic turning point. It was something better, real, honest, and grounded in mutual respect. Nathan faded into the background, his presence a distant memory rather than a looming threat. He moved out of town, taking a job far from the life he had once known. While his departure was met with relief, there was also a quiet hope that he might use this opportunity to rebuild himself. Far from the people he had hurt, months turned into a year, and life found its rhythm again. Sam and Rachel had built a community of support around them, leaning on friends and family while embracing the challenges of their new normal. For Sam, the scars of betrayal hadn't disappeared, but they no longer defined him. He had found strength in vulnerability, in admitting that pain was a part of life but not the whole of it. One sunny afternoon, Sam stood in Rachel's yard, watching her children race around with a soccer ball. Rachel came outside carrying lemonade, her laughter joining the warm breeze. "You look happy," she said, handing him a glass. "I am," Sam replied. "For the first time in a long time." Rachel smiled, and for a moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, the sounds of laughter and life surrounding them. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been messy, painful, and full of moments that tested their resolve. But through it all, Sam had learned that life wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about facing it head-on, finding strength in the cracks, and building something beautiful from the pieces. As the screen fades to black, the message is clear. Resilience isn't about forgetting the past, but about using it as a foundation for a stronger future. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for our next video. See you next.